Hello, everybody. Another webinar from StorSuite. This month's webinar is using ads and operational data to make smarter marketing decisions. Paul is my team member, and if you don't know me, my name is Taylor. I'm the Director of Marketing at StorSuite. We have a full-service agency to the storage industry, and Paul is our Client Marketing Manager and Strategist. He is in charge of all of the client strategy, the ads, and he is also our AI wizard. And he has brought some really wonderful operational data to our ad strategy. And so I'm excited for the deep dive that we are about to get into. So without further ado, I will hand it off to Paul. Paul, tell us a little bit about yourself, and let's get into what we're about to get excited about.
Yeah, well, what an introduction. I mean, we should do this more regularly just so I have that ego boost because, wow, that was incredible. My name is Paul Metzgar. I am the client marketing manager here at StorSuite. And that means I get to do all the cool marketing stuff for our clients. So the last year and a half or so, I've been really diving into these accounts, helping them see some success, and wanted to really share some of those insights that I've been picking up on. My background is kind of blended in both business operations and marketing. So I really like to bridge that gap for operators to help them, again, see the actual change in their revenue and not just a bunch of fancy marketing metrics. So using ads and operational data to make smarter marketing decisions is really the core of today's presentation. So a little bit of a context check. This year has been quite tricky for many of our operators, including some of our own locations. And it's not just you, right? We're seeing this across the country, just with some of the economic states and the challenges that are kind of happening. And so we're seeing that in rising CPCs, or the cost per click of your ads. We're seeing softening occupancy and also those compressed rates that make it difficult sometimes to hit those revenue goals. So it's not just you, it's not just us. We are seeing that at a larger scale. So for us, that means that we have to really apply those strategies well to overcome some of those challenges. Coming out of the COVID era, a lot of y'all that kind of started around that time frame saw a lot of initial success that might be kind of hitting some roadblocks. So again, we want to try to help you sustain that success. So that's what we're going to be kind of chatting about today. So I get a lot of questions about the best marketing strategies for operators, and it always kind of comes down to this, ads versus SEO, and really, which one is going to move the needle the most. And I wanted to just kind of say it takes a little bit of both. The trap is operators may want to throw their money at ads thinking that it's going to, bring in those new leads, but unless we're connecting it with their operational data and seeing that actual revenue change, then we're not going to really know what's working. So today is really about having a framework that allows you to make smarter ad choices that are driven by your facility's data. Again, working smarter, not harder. So paid ads are really going to be useful when you need leads now. It's going to be the immediate way that you can get in front of an audience and start to bring in those leads that you're needing. It really helps when somebody is searching to show up in an ad because it's going to be above all of the regular search results. So again, kind of gives you the advantage there. SEO is a little bit different approach. It's not as immediate, but it is still very important because it's going to set the foundation for your website. And it's really a compounding long game that improves the trust for your brand and ultimately will lead to lower cost per rental over time. So again, it's not a one or the other, but more of a blend that we need to look at. So if you're leasing up, there's going to be a different mix and a different strategy that we're going to look at versus once you've stabilized or potentially hit a plateau. And again, that's just something that it's not like a one size fits all solution. So again, it's rarely either or. It's about having the right strategy for both of those at the right time. So one thing I came into the self-storage world with was a lot of knowledge in other spaces. I had done some e-commerce stuff. I had done some online learning and had a lot of ad experience for different segments. And what I found was that ads in self-storage were some ways easier, but also in some ways much more challenging because we don't have the ability to rely on brand as much as we did in other spaces. So for self-storage, it's really about a data-based approach that goes beyond kind of those, again, softer areas like brand that support marketing. We kind of know that self-storage is hyper-local. We're trying to sell to people in the immediate area who need storage. So it typically means a smaller radius, typically a couple miles at a time versus a national campaign or a statewide campaign. These are also going to be very highly intent and highly commercialized keywords. So, self-storage near me is usually the number one way that we get traffic on site because it's people who are looking to do business either today or very soon. There are some differences though, right? The different type of facility you have, the different units that you may have that appeal to different tenants. So we want to make sure that your ads are going to align with what you have available, whether that's a climate controlled unit, a drive-up unit, perhaps an indoor unit for a vehicle that has power, all different sorts of types of units that need to be marketed a specific way. Another key aspect about self-storage ads is that a conversion is the rental, not just the lead form. And when we look at the scale of how many rentals are coming in on a given month, it's sometimes hard to get enough data to really make the best choices on the ad side. In other industries, you may have tens of thousands of leads every month and have the volume that really allows you to make choices a certain way. Whereas in self-storage, the attribution can be harder. So we have to find ways to create a system that allows us to get the data to make those decisions in a little different way. And so this is why it really matters who you have running your ads. I've seen operators try doing it themselves or use the new fanciest AI tool, and they typically fall short in a couple areas, which is what we're going to cover next. We kind of touched on it. As far as a generic agency goes, they don't necessarily have the understanding of the self-storage industry. They may not know how to read your operational reports or your management summary. And those things are going to be really important in building out your ads. And a lot of times just looking at the ad data isn't going to suffice because it just doesn't tell the whole picture. So it ends up with a really steep learning curve. And the ad metrics might look good, but you're not getting rentals. And so that ends up wasting your time and your money, something that we definitely don't want you to experience. So storage, again, is just genuinely different, focusing on the ROI and the ad budgets that don't resemble other industries. Typically, ad budgets in self-storage are going to be a lot smaller on a monthly basis than what most agencies are used to working with. And so they may not know the strategies to actually use that efficiently and sometimes have a hard time getting it to spend or getting it to be effective. So again, these generic playbooks tend to have some really big gaps. Being able to read your operational reports is going to be a very important aspect when working with an agency. Being able to pull your management summary, your rent roll, being able to analyze those to do unit mix and occupancy reports that go beyond just the percentages, but give some more insight into those types of units are all things that most agencies just don't know how to do. So kind of bridging the operational background with marketing allows me to really have a better understanding of what we need to do to make those units move for you. Another thing as a marketer is PMSs tend to have a lot of limitations. They can be very quirky. The unit feeds can be kind of tricky to work with. And ultimately, they make it more challenging for marketers to get the data that they need. So a specialized agency like StorSuite allows you to have the confidence that we know how to get the right data from your website. Whether that's on our platform or any others, you're able to know that the data is tracking the conversions to optimize for your ads. So again, this ultimately comes down to a big pain point, which is the high learning curve. Again, I've had so many operators say, yeah, I tried doing it on my own for 6 months or a year. and I was able to spend all this money but didn't get any results from it. And unfortunately, that is way too common. But I don't fault them because it's a rather challenging thing to do. There's a lot of ways that you have to look at the strategy and implementation to make sure that it's going to actually get a result for you. So again, it's a big learning curve that we don't want to see you wasting your time and dollars in. All right, so I wanted to show a few examples of the operational data that I use on a daily basis while I'm working on my marketing for clients. It's a part that sometimes people skip. A lot of times marketers may not be data focused, or maybe they are specialized, again, in running ads, but they don't understand how to read those reports from a PMS. So I wanted to break those down just a little bit, showcase exactly the types of reports that I'm pulling and the ways that I'm analyzing them so that y'all have a little bit better understanding as far as how to do this. Ad decisions should start with the operational reports, not the ad platform. This is kind of backwards from typical marketing thinking, and they'll look at the clicks, they'll look at the impressions, they'll look at the conversions, and ultimately if that looks healthy, then that they've done their job. But if it doesn't translate to real rentals, then they're missing the whole point. So starting with operational reports allows you to understand the types of units that are available, the types of customers that are renting them, and more importantly, where those customers are so that you're able to target them effectively. So these things all play a role in differentiating the thread that comes back to what StorSuite truly is at its core, which is focused on self-storage success. So a few of the reports that I actually pull on a regular basis are going to be the occupied and vacant units. And it really helps me start to see patterns for what types of units need to be advertised or promoted. I'll also pair that with the management summary to look at revenue, to look at occupancy, but then I'll also try to start looking at the churn rate to get a better idea of the lifetime value of a customer and the net rentals on a given month to really understand any momentum. And again, pairing that with churn allows me to see what type of monthly turnover to expect so we know how much money needs to be invested in recapturing new customers. So this is a metric hierarchy that allows me to keep those decisions honest. It's not just impressions and website lands, but again, looking at the actual operational health and where marketing needs to fill that gap. Another key item is going to be those tenant postal code data. So looking at the distribution of all of your customers and where they're located allows us to kind of follow similar patterns. And at times there's places where we can kind of go outside of that and strategically look to broaden your customer base. But for many storage facilities that are out of lease up phase, they have some well-established patterns. And sometimes those may or may not make sense from my perspective, looking at a map. Sometimes they can be items as silly as not crossing a railroad track or not crossing a highway. Any physical barriers or kind of psychological barriers that may prevent tenants from doing business in certain areas. So we're looking to find those patterns and ensure that we're continuing to bring the volume of customers that is going to, again, make a difference in your business. So I wanted to walk y'all through a real example from MSP, which is My Storage Plus. It's a brand that is owned by StorSuite. So it's a little bit easier to share some of that data with you guys. And I'll show you some of those reports, the insights that we pulled, the ad change, and ultimately the results that came from that. So starting off, we've got a lot of tables, a lot of numbers. So let me just kind of stop and say, hey, it's going to be okay. I'll break these down for you one by one and just kind of show you what they are and why they're important. So the first one here is the current performance and competitive positioning. This will be mostly on the Google Ads platform. So a traditional marketer is going to have access to this. They're going to be very familiar with that. Again, these will be your clicks on your ads, the number of impressions on your ads, the cost of running those ads, as well as the conversions. And so we get the cost per conversion from that. If none of this makes sense to you, just think of it as the number of people that are seeing the ad, clicking on it, and then ultimately coming to your website to convert. And so again, these are just very common marketing metrics that we look at, but they really don't tell the full picture. We can see here, this item is called impression share, and it's a percentage of how many times your ad shows up compared to competitor ads. So it allows you to understand if your budget is enough to capture enough attention, or if you're constantly being outbid by your competitors and you're never showing up. So again, one aspect that's common in the marketing space. But it doesn't really tell us a lot about the types of units that you have available or the places that those customers may be coming from. So one thing I like to pull is, again, those occupancy management summaries, a lot of the kind of core pieces in your PMS to be able to generate a different layer of analysis. So the first thing I like to do is pull your customer list and do analysis based on the zip code. And basically just counting the number of customers that are showing up from that zip code and providing what percentage of that is your customer base. So in this example, in Longview, Texas, we have 53 customers at this zip, which makes up 34% of the total tenant base. So it tells us that we have most of our customers coming from this one area. And similarly, we can see the remaining places here all the way down to this one customer that exists in this zip code. So it tells me there's some patterns, right? If we look at a circle or a radius around your location, it may or may not correspond directly to how these zips play out. So by having this hyper localized focus and understanding where your customers currently are from, we're able to kind of repeat some of those patterns. And again, I would say these top 3 or 4 are going to be really effective if we target your ads there, because they already have a customer base, and for whatever reason, it fits with the day-to-day flow of that region. Again, we have other zips here that show a smaller amount, and so I've classified them as a secondary market. So these are some customers that might be kind of a one-off example. Maybe they come into town to do business, and so they wanted to get a storage unit there. So they're not necessarily representing the full pattern. They're just kind of those outliers. So we wouldn't necessarily want to spend all of your ad budget on these places because it's probably not as common. And on a regular basis, we'll go through and review this to see if those things have changed and if we've received customers from new places that we should either be targeting, or if we've targeted new places, we can start to see, hey, have those customers actually shown up? Are we getting the full ROI from that ad spend? Okay, that's a lot of information so far, but again, it's going to get a little bit better. Hopefully it's all going to click. So by taking each of those zips, we then compare the ad performance. So Google Ads will show us where those ads are being shown, what zip codes we've targeted, as well as any spillover, and it will tell us how much we've spent. So this was a Q2 review, and we saw, this Longview 601 matching this Longview 601 being the primary place that we spent ads. So $195 of our ad spend. And of that, we had 8 conversions. So we had a total of $24.41 per conversion. And we can see that not all zip codes performed quite that well. Granted, we're working with very small numbers. That's, again, another inherent challenge of self-storage is we don't have hundreds or thousands of conversions on a monthly basis, or in this case, a quarterly basis. So we really have to be cautious not to assume patterns too soon. But again, this gives us an idea of some of those themes. Kilgore here shows only 0.6% of the customer base. Over on this table, we see there's only one customer there. And unfortunately, we spent $75 on ads in this period. And we got one conversion from it. So that cost was $75. So in this case, it really shows me that, hey, we can probably pull this Kilgore address and really focus on some of these lower cost conversion places. So it's one way to help reposition and retarget your ad spend. to make sure that it's being spent effectively. So again, this is just a layer of analysis that I love to do, and it really shows some of the gaps. And it does require some experimentation. And sometimes a zip code doesn't seem like it'll be a winner, but then we'll start to see, hey, customers are coming here, and we can kind of reorient that direction. So that covers where customers are coming from. But I wanted to dive a little deeper as far as the types of units that you may have and how to better market those individually. It's not a one-size-fits-all, right? Someone who may not be experienced in self-storage may just think, hey, self-storage is just, a very generic thing. But you may know that different unit sizes and features are going to appeal to different customers. So I like to look at it from a unit type analysis. This location I chose because it's a little more simple. These are all non-climate controlled. They're all drive up. So it takes out some of those variables, but it gives you a really clear example of what I'm talking about. By taking your occupied and vacant unit lists, we're able to then analyze the number of units of each type and then quantify which ones are occupied, vacant, and we'll say disabled or out of use. This could be for, sometimes it could be auction, sometimes it could be out of order for maintenance purposes. So again, very common from a PMS, but something important to note. And I like to look at the occupancy of each of these unit sizes, so I can start to see any themes. We can tell here that this 10 by 20 is really quite full at that 91%. And this 10 by 15 is less so, and the 10 by 10 even more. So it shows me that if we are running ads and spending money to try to get new customers, we need to be focusing on the units that are actually available. And if there's only 5 available on the 10 by 20s, then we may not want to push them as hard as we want to, let's say, of the 47 10 by. So crafting the ad language, right, having it appeal to more of those types of use cases are going to be important. And so I look at the standard rate for each of those units and multiply it by the vacancies to get this vacancy loss per month. And it makes it really clear where the revenue opportunity is, and again, how we can kind of push the ads that direction to maximize that ability. And so again, these critical priorities are important to focus on, whereas it may not be worth spending a lot of money on ads for the 2 vacancies that are only $50 a month. So that $100 loss, again, someone might come around and pick those up, but I want to focus on those higher revenue opportunities. Again, we're looking at ways to take data from your PMS and allow for marketing to fully utilize that to make the best decisions. Again, it's more than the Google Ads platform or Google Analytics platforms can offer. So a lot of agencies just don't know what to do with that data. The key aspects, again, are going to be the geo-targeting and making sure that your postal code analysis really drives the Google Ads targeting. It's not guesswork. It's not a 15-mile radius or even a 5-mile radius. It's not some arbitrary number. It's taking the data and allowing it to tell you where to continue to put in that ad spend. It's looking at that budget allocation as well as the way that you're wording the ads to align customers to what you have available. If I'm running ads and promoting something that's out of stock, then it's only going to bring traffic to the site that is not going to convert. So I want to look for ways to align that entire funnel so that they see an ad that aligns with what you have in inventory and ultimately leads to a purchase. Some agencies want to show what I call vanity metrics, and they want to show, hey, we brought more people to the site this month than ever before. And to me, that just doesn't matter if they're not actually aligned customers who want to do business with you. So again, by not focusing on those top of the line, Google ad metrics and looking at those operational metrics, that is, again, the biggest differentiator to ensure that your budget's going its furthest. And then I also wanted to call out, again, some specifics, in this case, to the RV, boat, maybe vehicle storage. These are very different types of buyers. A lot of times they could be seasonal. They may kind of correspond to different patterns than traditional storage. So it's a totally different strategy that we're going to be looking at, a very different radius, and ultimately different keywords. So if RV and boat is a big segment for you, then again, this is really important to get in alignment with from your marketing standpoint. The other aspect that I don't think a lot of operators think about is the different cycles of their business that they need marketing in. A lot of operators think, hey, I'm just launched, I have a lot of units to lease up. This is when I need marketing. And then as they start to hit those goals, they kind of deprioritize it. And sometimes they'll even just drop us altogether. And my suggestion on that is to rethink, where can that money be spent well that aligns with your current goals? So instead of needing the full volume to lease up, maybe you're kind of finding that taper. So, in those cases, we'll want to pull back ad spend. We don't need to be investing as much monthly, but you don't want to drop your marketing completely. One piece of that is because you're still going to have churn. And in some of these economic times of uncertainty, it doesn't allow for you to have the true flexibility to optimize your price. So again, each stage needs a different posture. It's not, again, that one size fits all, lease up, throw everything at it. We want to see at each stage of your business where that value add is and align the marketing strategy to go with it. Getting to the price optimization piece. Revenue optimization is not something that we do for you here at StorSuite with the marketing suite. That's something that we see as an operational decision, and we're happy to kind of partner with you and help kind of inform on some of the things that we're seeing. But ultimately, that is up to our operators still. One example that I wanted to share is this year, despite having occupancy down nationwide, our portfolio did see that same pattern. We saw occupancy down from the year prior. But because we had a healthy marketing engine behind us, we were able to increase rent and otherwise manage the revenue to ensure that our revenue actually increased despite that occupancy being down. So I believe we had a 6.5% Q1 year over year. Meanwhile, the REITs posted closer to a 0 to 1.7% year over year revenue increase. So again, it's part of that stabilization of our current business cycle. But again, it allows us to do revenue optimization and again, manage the business well. I didn't think this would be complete without giving a few, let's say, quick wins or quick answers to other marketing channels. I've spent a lot of time focusing on Google Ads, and there's a reason for that. Google Ads tends to be the number one driver across all of our client portfolios because it's intent-based. A tenant goes to Google, searches for storage units near me, and again, they're going to find what they need. So let's chat about some of those other platforms. Facebook or Meta tends to be better for awareness because if somebody is scrolling through their feed and they see an ad pop up, they may or may not be in the market for storage. So we want to align our expectations to understand that it's not the same intent-based, but more reactionary on that platform. So again, it fits in for awareness campaigns. If you're new to an area and want to get your name out to a lot of people, that's a good way to do it. It's kind of like the modern day mailer. Another item would be retargeting. Retargeting is when someone visits your website, then you run a meta ad to them and they see your ad come back. And so if they maybe came to your site, didn't make a purchase, this is one way to kind of encourage them back or just remind them that you're there. But ultimately, it's a very short window with self-storage, typically seeing, again, tenants make decisions in a little bit quicker manner, 15 to 30 to 60 days, sometimes sooner. So again, setting the expectations and not really over-investing in this platform is important, although it does have a place at times. Similarly, social media is kind of a tricky one. I think a lot of businesses have done well with social media, but in self-storage, it's not necessarily the first place that people are going to look for storage. So again, it's in my mind, it's more of like a proof of existence. If you have a profile, you have some images, you're showcasing your features and amenities, then it gives customers one more place to find you and get some of that social proof. Maybe you have tenants who have commented on there, maybe not. But it's not a place where if you put a lot of time and effort into that, you're going to see a big yield on your leads. So again, it's more of that reactive component instead of that high intent focus. These channels, I would say, are important not to overspend on, whether that's time, finances, and chasing any of those trends doesn't always translate to self-storage. So again, just an honest take on these platforms. But the good news is you don't have to do this alone. I know we covered a lot of information, and to be honest, it just barely scratches the surface of what I do here day to day. So if you're struggling or having any issues getting tenants to your facility, we would love to look at your data. We'd love to kind of observe and audit what things are working and what things aren't, so we can come up with some solutions and make sure that you're going to be successful. The owners who are winning right now aren't necessarily working harder. They're working smarter with the right systems and a data-based team that is able to navigate those items. We've run ads across our internal portfolio as well as client portfolios. And so we really know what is converting right now and what's just wasting budget. So again, if you want that second set of eyes, please feel free to send me an email, or I think there might be a QR code here in a minute. And I'm happy to look through some of your data, again, understand and explore if there's opportunities for us to work on together. And if not, then I'll be honest and I'll tell you that. I don't want to waste your time, and don't want you to feel like, again, there's this big sales pitch or something coming, because at the end of the day, we are just operators who are wanting to help operators as well. Taylor, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Paul. You did an awesome job. You go so into the numbers and so into the data, and the way that you've been able to take our ad strategy and just our strategy in our department, our suite, to the next level has really changed the game for a lot of our operators. We will be answering any and all questions. I will start with the common question that I know that we get a lot as marketers, which is, if you are already at high occupancy, say you've already reached 92% and you've been there for a really long time, should you be running ads?
Well, it depends on, again, what that 92% consists of, right? Looking at your revenue, looking at those unit pricing lists gives us a really clear idea as far as the type of revenue that's available for us to capture. So if you're in a larger facility, you could still have quite a bit of revenue left on the table. If you're in a smaller facility and maybe only have 1 or 2 units left, again, it's just going to depend on what your goals are. And sometimes trying to fill those last 1 or 2 units just isn't as efficient. It doesn't really allow for there to be a lot of upside. It's really going to depend on your situation and what your goals are. And that's part of the process of auditing and kind of looking at and setting those goals together.
Absolutely. And it shouldn't rule out ads for you. That's for sure. It's still, just because you've reached a high occupancy, do you then need to be looking at your revenue and in your revenue management and the pricing and all of that to get more revenue through the door. So also, like, what does your churn look like? Kind of like what you talked about at the beginning.
Yeah. There's another thing that kind of comes up for me there too. Yeah. I talked a lot about high intent campaigns, right? That's the kind of the driving force here of Google. But we find that when facilities start to kind of hit their goals and they're really kind of tapering off on that intent focus, we're able to bring in different strategies and different types of campaigns that really continue to keep their brand name top of mind, that ensure that competitors aren't bidding on their keywords, and it's kind of a more defensive posture. But the cost is much lower to do that. So it's kind of a sustaining of your business, and it doesn't really allow for competitors to get as much of an edge over you. Granted, if you have no vacancies, then they're going to have to go somewhere else. But again, it keeps you present in the conversation and allows for your brand to not have to play catch up later. That's kind of the one of the scenarios that I see operators saying, "Hey, like, we got behind, we were doing well, and then 2 months, and kind of in an emergency now." So instead of waiting for that moment, again, staying proactive, aligning your spend to kind of fit that tends to be the more stable business decisions. So you don't have again, a couple bad months that really put you under.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question that I know that we commonly get is, how do you know if your ads are working? And that conversion conversation, a lot of people expect that conversions are only online rentals or only completed rentals. How do you or we look at conversions, and how do we know that they're working?
Yeah, that's a great point. So conversions, at the end of the day, we want to see that rental, right? We want to see the revenue coming in from that new tenant. But again, some of the scalability is where, again, there's some challenges with self-storage. Typically, there's different ways that we can configure your ad campaign to optimize for certain types of conversions. So we have to start by kind of looking at the different pipeline checkpoints that lead to that ultimate purchase conversion. So beyond just a website visit, we want to see, are they clicking on your phone number? Are they sending an email? Are they showing interest in kind of those lead engagement opportunities? And for a lot of accounts, that's where we have to start, because they just don't have the same amount of volume that Google is needing for their algorithm to efficiently deliver. So when I see a new customer coming to us and saying, hey, we've got $300 per conversion, it kind of throws some red flags, because again, those conversions can be defined, and a lot of times they can be defined poorly or in a way that's not allowing for Google to get the feedback loop that it needs. So we really try to hone in on that and have enough data to work with.
Absolutely. Is there a particular cost that a owner operator should be trying to target in terms of their cost per click or their cost per conversion? Is there a one number that we're looking at across the portfolio?
It would be easy to say yes. It would be easy to say yes, right? When it comes to kind of benchmarking cost, what you really want to look at is beyond cost per click, because cost per click is going to be very dependent on your local market. It's going to be all the competition and you throwing your hat into that auction, seeing who's getting those keywords. So again, that's going to vary greatly. Cost per conversion also varies, I'd say, more than most operators suspect. And again, that's because you can set those parameters for what counts as a conversion. So one account may show $2 per conversion, another one $300 per conversion. And it's easy to think one is better than the other, but you have to look at what that conversion is defined as. So again, it's more of an internal comparison when we're looking at the way that we set conversions and can look at it. What I think is the bigger benchmarkable metric is to look at your cost per acquisition of customers. So looking at your monthly spend on your marketing package, right? Looking at your Google ad spend, any management fees, things like that, and trying to understand how that plays into your average lifetime value of a customer. So again, it's going to take a couple months of investment to sometimes recoup that if your average tenant is staying for 12, 16, 18 months. So again, it's looking at the bigger picture, really understanding there's a lot of nuance here. And again, that's really where I like to partner with operators to set some of those goals.
Absolutely. I'll back you up on that. It really is so much about the individual facility. There's no two facilities that have the exact same situation. It varies so much by the competition in the area too, especially when we're talking about Google Ads, how much money or how many dollars are in the pool of the area you're trying to target and the keywords that you're trying to target, that it can just vary so much. And if you're in an area where there's a bunch of REITs, you're going to be looking at more expensive ads just because they have the dollars to flood the market. So it's always hard for us to give oh yeah, you want to target a $30 cost per conversion. And, that may be true in some cases and that may be not true in others. So it always fluctuates. Thank you all for those who have attended. Paul, thank you so much for your time on the slides and the deep dive. This is so valuable. Y'all just got a 101 course in ads. So I hope you enjoyed it. I appreciate your time and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Taylor.